I want to tell you something that happened to me 8 months ago that I have never fully talked about out loud. Not to my friends, not on here, not even to myself some nights. And I'm telling you right now, because if you have ever felt like the system was designed to break you, or like the people with power were using it to make sure you stayed small, then this story is for you. Before I get into it, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, because this community always shows up and I want to know who's in the room with me right now. And if you're not subscribed yet, please do that now, because what I'm about to share takes 4 parts and you don't want to come back to part 3 without the foundation. Here's what I want you to picture. It's a Saturday afternoon in April. The whole school is out on the main lawn for the spring charity fair, one of those school events with the matching banners and the tables covered in bright tablecloths and everyone smiling for the photos. Music is playing from somewhere. It smells like funnel cake and fresh cut grass. It genuinely looks like the kind of day that ends with people saying that was a good day. I am standing behind the student volunteer booth, rearranging pamphlets about the local food bank because I'd been bumped off the engineering demonstration table that morning, and that was a whole separate situation I was still trying not to think about. I had my hair pulled back. I was wearing my good sneakers, the ones that aren't falling apart, for what it's worth. I was trying to just get through the afternoon, do my hours, and go home. And then I heard his voice. I don't even need to tell you whose voice it was. You already know, don't you? You already know the type. The kind of voice that carries across a crowd and expects everyone to turn and look. And they do. They always do. Because that voice has never been told no in a way that stuck. Look who decided to come out and play. His name was Chase Whitfield, 16 years old, 6 feet tall, white, blonde, and fully aware of every advantage that came with being both of those things at a school where his mother was the principal and his father was the superintendent of the entire district. He walked around Westbrook Academy like the building had been constructed specifically for him. And honestly, when you thought about who had the most power to make sure he never faced any consequences for anything, it might as well have been. He had been on my case for over a year by the time that Saturday happened. I want you to understand what I mean by on my case. I don't mean occasional teasing. I mean a consistent, deliberate campaign. Comments about my hair every single time he saw me. What it looked like, how it smelled, whether it was real, remarks about my clothes in front of groups of people. Did you get that from the donation bin? That kind of thing. Once, during a school assembly, he and his friend Kyle sat directly behind me and spent the entire 40 minutes whispering things just loud enough for me to hear and not quite loud enough for the teacher at the front to catch. Things I am not going to repeat here. And the reason he kept going, the reason it stretched from weeks into months, was because I never reacted. Not because I was afraid of him, because of my father. My dad, Raymond Davis, has been teaching karate for 30 years. He opened his own dojo when I was 3 years old, and by the time I could walk in a straight line, he had me on the mat. I earned my black belt at 12. I have spent more hours practicing falls, holds, redirects, and controlled defensive techniques than I have spent watching TV in my entire life. My dad did not teach me how to fight. He was very specific about that distinction. He taught me how to not have to fight, and if it ever came to that, how to end it with as little harm as possible to both people involved. A black belt is not a weapon. He told me so many times it became like a saying. It's a wall. You build it so things can't reach you. You don't use it to go out and knock things down. So when Chase started in on me that first time, freshman year, I thought about that wall. And I walked away. And I kept walking away. Month after month, I walked away. And every time I did, I could feel how much Chase enjoyed it. The walking away wasn't invisible to him, it wasn't even invisible to the people watching. I think some of them thought I was a pushover. I think some of them thought I was scared. And maybe on the inside, some days I was something close to scared. Not of him, but of what might happen if I ever stopped walking away. Because I knew that his mother ran the school, I knew that his father ran the district, and I was one black girl on a full scholarship at a school where I had fought hard just to get in the door. I had too much to lose. That's what I kept telling myself. That Saturday in April, Chase had Kyle and Brody with him. That was always how it went. He needed an audience, always. He didn't say anything particularly creative when he walked up. He just started in about my sneakers, about how I was basically the hired help at my own school's event, about how it made sense that I was at the volunteer booth because wasn't that what I was here for anyway? I rearranged the pamphlets. I did not look at him. Then he shoved me. It was light the first time. The kind of thing that if you described it to someone later, they might say, "Are you sure it was intentional?" But it was. I stumbled back against the table edge and I caught myself. And I looked up at him and he was smiling. Phones were already coming out. I could see it in my peripheral vision. The subtle pivot of bodies, the raised screens, the tiny red recording lights. Keep walking, I told myself. Turn around and walk away. But he wasn't done. He started in again, louder this time, clearly performing now for the cameras and the growing circle of students around us. Something about how my scholarship was basically charity, and wasn't it ironic that I was at the charity booth? Something about how schools like Westbrook used to have standards. I don't remember every word because at some point the words stopped registering, and all I was tracking was the space between us. And then he shoved me again. Harder. Both hands flat against my shoulders. I went backward into the edge of the table, and the whole thing gave way. The tablecloth, the stack of pamphlets, the little display stand I had spent 20 minutes setting up that morning, all of it scattered across the grass. I hit the ground with my palms first, the way my dad taught me to fall. Absorb the impact, protect your head, never panic. The grass was slightly damp, I remember that. I remember the cold of it against my hands. And I remember the sound the crowd made. It wasn't horror, it wasn't outrage, it was anticipation. That low buzz of people waiting to see what comes next. The way they wait at the part of a movie right before something explodes. Half of them had their phones pointed at me, waiting to capture my reaction, waiting for me to cry or beg or just lie there. I got up. That's the part that seems small when I say it out loud, but in that moment, getting up was everything. I placed one hand in the cool grass, pushed myself upright, and stood straight. I could feel every heartbeat in the side of my neck. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. Something in me had become very, very still. Chase took a step toward me. And this is the part I have to be honest with you about, because I have thought about this moment more times than I can count in the months since. I did not get angry. I did not lose control. What happened inside me was not rage. It was something more like clarity, like the way a room looks when the lights finally come on. Everything sharp, everything in its exact right place. He reached out to grab my arm. I moved. I can't break down every second of it for you because it happened in 3 movements, maybe 4 seconds total. And when you have trained something into your body for 10 years, it stops being a decision. It becomes something your body just does, the way you blink when something comes at your eye. I caught his wrist. I turned my body. I used the momentum of his own forward movement and redirected it. He went down into the grass, hard enough to be real, controlled enough to be safe. No punches, no kicks, no rage, no performance, just the clean, quiet geometry of 10 years of training coming to the surface for exactly as long as it needed to. He hit the ground. The crowd went silent. I mean, that literally, that specific corner of the lawn went so quiet I could hear the music from the event DJ 3 booths over playing something with a cheerful beat. Chase was on his back in the grass, looking up at the sky with an expression I had never seen on him before. Not pain, not really. Something more like disbelief, like someone had unplugged the power source to his entire identity for just a moment and he didn't know what to do with his face while it rebooted. I straightened up. I said nothing. I started collecting my pamphlets from the grass. Kyle's mouth was open. Brody had taken 2 steps back without realizing it. The students around us were still frozen with their phones up, and I could see the little wheels turning. Do I post this? What did I just see? Destiny appeared from somewhere to my left and started helping me pick up the display stand without a word. Just appeared like she always does. I had just picked up the last pamphlet when I heard Chase move behind me. I turned, not fast, just turned, and he was on his feet already, brushing grass off his jacket. His expression had reset into something I couldn't quite read. Not humiliation, not anger. Something more controlled than either. He said something to Kyle, low, just barely loud enough to reach me. Perfect. Just that one word. And then he held out his hand to Brody, was helped to his feet, and walked away. Casual. Like it was all part of a plan, like he had just finished the first step of something. And maybe that should have been a relief. Him walking away, the confrontation ending. Maybe I should have taken my display stand back to the table and finished my volunteer hours and gone home and considered the day done. But that word stayed with me. Perfect. Not whatever. Not this isn't over. Not even the kind of threat you could put into words and take to a teacher. Just perfect. Like he'd gotten exactly what he came for. Like the fact that I had defended myself, the fact that it was all on camera, wasn't a problem for him at all. Like it was the whole point. I stood there in the afternoon sun with Destiny beside me and all those phones still pointed in my direction. And I felt the first cold flicker of something that wasn't quite fear, but lived in the same neighborhood. My dad's voice in the back of my head, steady as it always was. Control the breath, control the body, control the response. I controlled all three. But as I watched Chase Whitfield walk back through the crowd, nodding at people, laughing at something Kyle said, completely at ease, I knew, with a certainty that settled into my chest like a stone, that whatever just happened on that lawn wasn't the end of anything. It was a beginning. By Sunday night, I was already guilty. Not in any court, not in any official record, but in the way it matters most when you're 14 years old at a school where everyone has a phone and an opinion, in the group chats, in the comment sections, in the hallway whispers that travel faster than any announcement over the PA system. I was lying on my bed at 9:47 p.m., still in the same clothes from the charity fair because I hadn't been able to make myself move much since my dad and I got home. I had replayed the afternoon in my head so many times, it had started to feel less like a memory and more like a math problem I was trying to solve backwards. Had I done the right thing? Had I made it worse? Had I... My phone screen lit up. It was Destiny. A text with no words, just a link. I stared at the preview for a second before I clicked it. The video was already at 400 views. I watched it twice without blinking, and by the second time through, my hands had gone cold in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. Here's what the video showed. A girl, me, throwing a 16-year-old boy to the ground at a school charity event. No context, no setup, no Chase's first shove, no Chase's second shove, no the table going over, none of it. Just the last 4 seconds of the whole encounter, cropped and looped, edited with the smoothness of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The caption read, "Scholarship Girl Goes Feral at Westbrook Spring Fair Unhinged." There were already comments. I didn't read them. I put my phone face down on the mattress and pressed both palms flat against it like I was trying to push the entire thing through the floor. My dad knocked on my door at 10. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just sat on the edge of my desk chair, the way he always did when something needed talking about and the talking hadn't started yet. Raymond Davis never rushed into a conversation. He waited until the right words came, and, in the meantime, the silence between us was never uncomfortable. It was just quiet, the same way the dojo went quiet before a session began. Not empty, but ready. I told him about the video. He asked to see it. I watched his face while he watched the clip, and nothing in his expression shifted. Not a muscle, not the set of his jaw, not the steadiness behind his eyes. He handed the phone back. "You expected this?" I asked. "I considered it possible," he said. "That's the same thing." He didn't argue with that. He set his hands on his knees, looked at the floor for a moment, and then looked at me. "What do you know for certain right now? Not what you're guessing. What do you actually know?" I thought about it. I know that video is edited. I know I was there. I know what really happened. "That's 3 things," he said. "Hold on to those 3 things and don't let anything else push them out." He left me alone after that. I didn't sleep until past 2 in the morning. By the time I finally closed my eyes, the video had hit 3,000 views and was still climbing. Monday came at me like a wall. I want to be honest with you about something, because I think a lot of people in situations like mine pretend they walked into school that day with their head high and their heart completely steady. And yes, I walked in straight. My posture was fine. I had my bag on one shoulder and my earbuds in, and I moved through the main entrance the same way I always did. But on the inside? On the inside, I felt like every single pair of eyes in that building already knew something I was only just beginning to understand fully. And I was right. By first period, 3 people who usually sat near me in AP chemistry had shifted their chairs by an inch or two. Subtle enough that you could call it coincidence, but I knew. I had been navigating the social geometry of Westbrook long enough to recognize the difference between someone rearranging because they needed more space and someone rearranging because they didn't want to be associated with whatever was happening to you. I said nothing. I took out my notebook and opened it to a blank page and wrote the date at the top, just to give my hands something to do. Between first and second period, a sophomore I vaguely recognized from student council stopped me in the hallway and said, with an expression that I think was meant to be sympathy, "I saw the video. That was really scary." And she kept walking before I could respond. Scary. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "I can't believe he pushed you first." Scary. Like I was the dangerous thing. Like I was the element in the situation that required warning. I filed that away and kept moving. I had just gotten to my locker when Trey appeared from the opposite direction. He fell into step beside me without any preamble, the way he always navigated things. Efficiently, without drama. Like someone who'd been conserving energy his entire life, specifically for moments that actually required it. "You see the metadata on the video account?" he said, voice low. I didn't look for that. I did. Whoever uploaded it created the account 3 hours after the fair ended. The video was the first and only post. No followers, no profile picture, no history. He paused. That's not a random student who pulled out their phone and posted something impulsively. That's a setup account, made for one purpose. I looked at him. Don't react right now, he said. I'm just telling you what I found. We can talk later. Jade wants to meet. He peeled off toward his own class before I could say anything back. I had exactly 43 minutes of normal left before the day officially became something else entirely. That was when the announcement came over the PA. Amara Davis, please report to the main office. Amara Davis to the main office. I had been to the main office twice in my 3 years at Westbrook. Once to pick up a permission slip that had gotten misrouted, and once for an academic honors certificate. The office had always felt like neutral ground to me. Bright fluorescent lighting, the smell of printer paper and industrial carpet cleaner, Mrs. Henley at the front desk who always asked about my father's dojo whenever she saw me. That Monday, Mrs. Henley did not look up when I walked in. That single detail told me everything I needed to know before I'd even taken a seat. They kept me waiting 11 minutes. I counted. Then the door to the inner office opened and a woman in a gray blazer with her hair cut short and precise stood in the doorframe and looked at me with an expression that was perfectly, professionally blank. The kind of blankness that takes practice to maintain. Principal Karen Whitfield. I had never had a real conversation with Chase's mother before. I'd seen her at assemblies and donor events, shaking hands, smiling the appropriate amount, saying the right things at the right volumes. She was polished in the way that expensive things are polished, smooth on the surface, very hard underneath. Come in, she said. The office was orderly to the point of feeling sterile. There was a framed photo of Chase on her desk. Younger, maybe 10 or 11, holding up a trophy. I noticed it, and I noticed that I'd noticed it, and I deliberately shifted my eyes to the wall calendar instead. She sat down. She did not offer me a seat. I sat anyway. I'm sure you know why you're here, she said. I'd like to hear your version, I said. Something moved behind her eyes. A small recalibration, the tiniest adjustment, as if she hadn't expected that sentence from someone my age. But she recovered instantly. She was skilled at this. I'll give her that. There was an incident at Saturday's charity fair, she said, her voice smooth and even, involving you and another student. We've received a formal complaint, and given the severity of what's been documented, the school is required to act. Documented, I said. There is video evidence of you physically assaulting a fellow student without provocation. I kept my face still. My dad's voice, steady and clear in the back of my mind. Don't hand them your reaction. It's the most valuable thing you own right now. I'd like to see that evidence, I said. You'll have an opportunity to respond during the formal review process. She folded her hands on the desk. In the meantime, effective today, you are placed on out-of-school suspension pending the outcome of the investigation. The room went very quiet. I could hear the ventilation system humming in the ceiling. I could hear typing somewhere in the outer office. I could hear very faintly the sound of students changing classes in the hallway. The particular rumble of 200 people moving through a building at the same time. Completely unaware that in this room, the floor was being pulled out from under someone. For how long? I asked. Until the matter is resolved. She slid a single sheet of paper across the desk toward me. This is the formal notice. Your parents will receive a copy by mail. I picked it up. I read every word. The language was carefully chosen. Pending safety investigation, temporary removal for the welfare of the school community. The kind of wording that would sound reasonable to anyone reading it without knowing what had actually happened on that lawn. It was bureaucratic cover dressed up in concern. I set it back down. Is there anything you'd like to say at this time? Principal Whitfield asked. I'd like a copy of the formal complaint that was filed, I said, and the name of the individual who filed it. The flicker behind her eyes was faster this time, barely a half second. That information will be made available through the formal process. I stood up. I picked up my bag. Thank you for letting me know, I said, and I walked out. I made it all the way to the girls' bathroom at the end of the east hallway before I stopped. I turned on the cold tap. I held both hands under the running water and kept them there for 30 seconds, watching it move over my knuckles, and I breathed. In. 4 counts. Hold. 4 counts. Out. 4 counts. My dad's method. His way of slowing time down to something manageable. When I looked up at the mirror, my face was unfamiliar. Not because it looked different, but because the expression on it was one I'd never worn before. Not fear. Not even anger, exactly. Something harder than both. My dad came to get me from the parking lot. He said almost nothing on the drive home. He let me talk, and I talked more in those 20 minutes than I had all weekend, getting everything out. The suspension notice, Principal Whitfield's carefully blank face, the wording on the paper, Mrs. Henley not looking up. He listened. Hands on the wheel, eyes on the road. When I finished, he let the silence sit for a moment, then said, "Did you bring the notice with you?" They kept the original. "We'll request a copy in writing this afternoon." He turned onto our street. "Don't email. Send a physical letter. Keep a copy of that letter, too." I looked at him. You already knew this was coming. He parked and turned the engine off, but didn't move to get out. "When someone with power moves against someone without it," he said, "they usually move fast, before the person without power has time to think. The whole goal is to get you reacting instead of thinking. As long as you're reacting, they control the pace." He looked at me directly. "We are not going to react. We are going to think." I nodded. We went inside. By Tuesday, the second day of my suspension, the second wave arrived. Jade texted me a screenshot from a shared student message board. Someone had posted what they called an eyewitness account of the charity fair. It described watching me go through a jacket that had been left on a chair near the volunteer booth. The post described a watch, custom, allegedly given to Chase by his late grandfather, described as worth several $100s. That had gone missing from that jacket. The implication was written in the spaces between the words. I had taken it. Within 2 hours, Brody had added his own claim in the comments. A varsity jacket he said he'd left draped over a nearby chair had also vanished. Both items were now officially missing. The post had over 60 comments by the time Jade sent it to me. I read it 3 times from the kitchen table. The watch, the jacket, missing. I had never touched either. I had been behind the volunteer booth the entire afternoon. 2 other students had been there with me. I could name them both. And there was a school-mounted camera on the east lamppost that I was reasonably certain had a full sightline on that stretch of the lawn. But none of that mattered if the story spread fast enough, and it already was. By Wednesday, the formal notification arrived, mailed to our house, addressed to my father from the Westbrook Academy Office of Student Conduct. In addition to the suspension, my full academic scholarship had been placed on formal review hold. In plain terms, if the disciplinary investigation concluded with a finding against me, the scholarship committee reserved the right to revoke my funding immediately. With no right to appeal within the current academic year, my scholarship, the one that had taken me 2 years to earn, that my father and I had revised and polished and rewritten until every sentence meant exactly what it needed to mean. The scholarship that covered not just tuition, but the lab programs, the academic competitions, the access to resources that didn't exist at the school in our neighborhood. The scholarship that was, in a very concrete way, my future. They were going to take it. Not in those words, not yet. But the mechanism was already in motion, and it had been designed to make the outcome look inevitable before anyone could stop to question the process. I remember that exact moment. Sitting at the kitchen table, afternoon light coming warm and amber through the window, the letter in front of me, very flat and official. I read it twice. I folded it carefully back along its crease and set it down. "Dad," I said. "Dad, I know," he said from the counter. He hadn't read it. He'd seen my face. I thought I had it together. I had been breathing through everything since Saturday. Through the video, the suspension, the theft accusations, Destiny's careful daily reports about what was being said at school. I had been staying ahead of the panic, staying measured, staying in the space my father's training had carved out inside me over 10 years of early mornings on cold dojo mats. Then my dad walked over and sat down across from me and put his hands flat on the table, not reaching, just there, present and completely still, and looked at me with that expression he had, the one that was not pity and not alarm, but something I could only describe as absolute faith, the kind of faith that doesn't ask for proof. And something in me cracked. Not broke, cracked. The way solid material cracks under sustained pressure, not falling apart, but splitting along a line that had been holding under tension for too long. I cried. Not the performative kind, the other kind, the kind that comes from somewhere deeper than your throat, somewhere below words. My dad sat there and let me. He didn't tell me it would be okay. He had never once said something he wasn't sure was true. When I finally quieted, he stood up, filled 2 glasses of water, set one in front of me, and sat back down. "You want me to talk, or do you need to sit?" he asked. "Talk," I said. He took a breath. "When I was young, I made the mistake of thinking fairness was the default state of things. That if you worked hard and did right by people and told the truth, the world would automatically reflect that back. I wasted years being angry when it didn't." He turned his glass in a slow circle on the table. "What I understand now is that fairness isn't a default. It's a result. It's something you have to build. Sometimes it means going through something deeply unfair to get there. Not because the universe is testing you or any of that, but just because that's how reality works when power is distributed unevenly." "That's not exactly comforting," I said. "I know," he said. "I'm not trying to comfort you. I'm trying to arm you." He looked at me steadily. "The truth doesn't need your permission to exist," he said. "It's already out there, whether anyone can see it right now or not. Your job isn't to manufacture it. It's to find the path that lets other people see what's already there. That's all." He paused. "Can you do that?" I thought about the white delivery truck at the edge of the charity lawn, the logo on the side, the way it had been parked facing the event for most of the afternoon. I had filed that detail away on Saturday without knowing exactly why. Just the instinct, trained into me by years of being asked to notice things, to see the full picture of a situation before reacting to any part of it. "I think so," I said. "I need to pause here and be honest with you about something." There's a version of this story where I had everything figured out from the start, where I was calm and strategic from the moment it began, where I was already 3 steps ahead. And I want to be clear with you. That is not how it felt from inside it. From inside it, it felt like drowning in slow motion. Every time I thought I'd found stable ground, there was another development, another post, another letter, another person I'd sat next to in class for 3 years, who was now very interested in their shoes when I walked by. Destiny stayed. Trey stayed. Jade was already working on things I wouldn't find out about until later, but the withdrawal from everyone else, the careful way former classmates stopped making eye contact, the way certain teachers developed a sudden urgency to be elsewhere when I appeared, that was its own particular variety of cold. I went to the school library on Thursday morning. I was suspended from attending classes, but technically still permitted on campus during study hours, a detail that had perhaps not been carefully thought through, and I was in the back corner near the window with a textbook open in front of me when someone set a stack of essays on the table beside mine and sat down. Mr. Patterson. He didn't look at me right away. He uncapped a red pen and began marking papers. The scratch of the pen the only sound between us. After maybe 5 minutes, without looking up, he said quietly, "The east lamppost near the volunteer booth has a camera." I looked at him. Submitting a formal request for footage from that camera would go through the district office. He continued, still focused on the essays, which creates an obvious conflict of interest, given current circumstances. He turned a page. However, footage can be subpoenaed if a formal legal complaint is filed with an outside party. He gathered his papers, stood up, and walked away. I sat with that for a long moment, then took out my phone and texted Trey 3 words. "Meet me tonight." We used the public library 3 blocks from school. Neutral, no cameras connected to anyone we knew, the kind of place where people worked quietly and asked no questions. Trey set his laptop on the table between us and pulled up a screenshot of the falsified security log, the document that had been submitted as evidence I had accessed the student lounge to steal Chase's watch. "Look at the timestamp," he said. According to the log, I had entered the student lounge at 2:14 p.m. on Saturday. Now, look at this. He opened a second tab, the Charity Fair Volunteer sign-in sheet. My name, check-in at 1:30 p.m. No checkout time logged because nobody had come back to the booth to record it after the confrontation. There were 3 people working that booth with you between 1:30 and the time everything happened. They can all confirm you never left. "But the log says 2:14, I said. "The log says 2:14, he confirmed. "Whoever created that entry didn't bother checking whether you had an alibi for that time. They assumed you'd accept the suspension, lose the scholarship, and leave. They assumed it would never be examined." He looked at me. "They made a mistake, Amara. A real one." That word, mistake, landed differently than I expected. Small. One small crack in the structure they'd built around me. But a crack is a crack. "There's something else," I said. And I told him about the delivery truck. I described it from memory. A white logistics van with a small company logo on the side, parked along the north edge of the charity lawn for most of the afternoon. I had registered it without consciously focusing on it. My dad had trained me since I was small to take in the full picture of any space I walked into. Not to analyze it in real time, but to file it away. The truck had been facing the event. It had been there from at least 1:30 until well after the confrontation. Commercial delivery vehicles that size were legally required by most insurance carriers to run dash cams during operating hours. It was standard policy. If that camera had been running, if it had a sight line on the booth, it would have everything. The silence between us stretched long enough that I could hear someone at the next table turning pages. "We need to find that truck," Trey said finally. His voice had shifted. That quiet, methodical intensity he got when he was tracking something. "We need to find it before anybody else thinks to." I walked home that evening by the long route, past the park where my dad used to bring me when I was small, where he'd teach me katas in the open space between the picnic tables. The trees along the path were in that particular early spring green that only lasts a week or two before it deepens and settles into full summer color. And I kept my eyes on them as I walked, using them the way I used breathing. Something stable and external to anchor to when everything internal was moving too fast. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I stopped on the path. Late afternoon light cut long shadows through the trees. I looked at the notification for 3 full seconds before opening it. The text was short. You should know who you're dealing with. My dad controls every administrator in this district. Every single one. You think you found something? He'll seal it before you can move. Drop all of it and maybe you still have a future here. No name, no signature, but it didn't need one. I stood there in the fading light, phone in my hand, and a memory surfaced. Specific and clear. The way the best memories tend to surface exactly when you need them. I was 9 years old in the dojo, still working toward my brown belt, and my dad had put me against a sparring partner who outweighed me by 40 pounds. I kept getting taken down. Not beaten, just taken down again and again, until I sat on the mat and started to cry and asked him to stop the session. He walked over, crouched down to my level, looked me directly in the eye. The second you believe you've already lost is the second you actually lose. Not before that. Never before that. So as long as you haven't believed it yet, you haven't lost. I put the phone in my pocket and kept walking. The trees were still green. The path was still solid under my feet. Somewhere in the city, a white delivery truck with a dashcam had been parked on the north edge of a school lawn on a Saturday afternoon in April, and its camera had recorded the truth, all of it, from beginning to end, exactly as it happened, in the clean and uneditable language of a lens that had no reason to lie. I just had to find it before anyone figured out that it existed. Destiny showed up at my front door the next morning before I'd finished breakfast. She came through to the kitchen like she always did. All forward motion, hair slightly loose, bag half unzipped, and dropped into the chair across from me with the particular urgency of someone who had been holding something in since the night before. I need you to listen before you react, she said. I put my fork down. I was in the hallway yesterday between 4th and 5th, she said, near the science wing. Chase and Kyle came out of the bathroom and they didn't see me standing by the lockers, and I heard Chase say— She stopped for half a second. He said, the edit literally took me 20 minutes, Kyle, and now she's completely done. 20 minutes. The sentence landed in the center of my chest and spread outward. 20 minutes. His own words, his own voice. Spoken out loud in a school hallway because he had spent 16 years in a world where nothing he said ever came back to cost him anything. He saw me right after, Destiny said. He saw that I'd heard, and he just— She shook her head slightly. He smiled at me, Amara, like it was funny. Like, even if I told the whole school, there was nothing anybody could do. I sat with that for a moment. Are you okay? She asked. Yes, I said. And I meant it in a way I hadn't meant anything in days. Not because nothing was wrong, not because any part of this was fine, but because something had shifted in the last 24 hours. And I could feel it clearly now, the way you can feel a change in pressure before a storm. There were real cracks now, a timestamp that didn't match, a truck that had been there, words said out loud by a boy who had never once learned that silence could be a form of protection. 20 minutes to edit a video. When I found that truck, Chase Whitfield's 20 minutes were going to become the most expensive mistake of his life. There is something my father taught me about the difference between preparing to defend and preparing to win. Defending, he used to say, is reactive. You wait for the hit and you manage the damage. Winning is different. Winning means you've already decided on the outcome before anything lands. You've mapped the space, measured the variables, and positioned yourself so that when the moment comes, you're not scrambling. You're already exactly where you need to be. By Friday evening, we were done defending. The four of us sat in a rough circle on the dojo floor: me, Trey, Jade, and Destiny. Shoes off at the door, the way everyone always was in that space. The overhead lights turned down to the secondary setting that made the room feel more amber than fluorescent. My dad had unlocked the back room and left us to it. I could hear him in the kitchen at the far end of the building, the low sound of him making tea, the particular rhythm of it, someone nearby but giving you room to work. Trey had a yellow legal pad across his knees. He had been writing on it for 10 minutes before he said anything, filling it in columns in that handwriting of his that was somehow both messy and precise, like the letters had been placed in a hurry but with intention. When he finally looked up, his expression was the one I'd come to recognize over 3 years of knowing him. Not dramatic, not alarmed, just deeply and almost uncomfortably focused. "Okay," he said, "here is what this actually is." He held up the legal pad. 3 columns. At the top of each, one word: evidence tampering, false reporting, conspiracy. "These aren't school violations," he said. "They're crimes. Criminal violations of state statutes. What Chase did, fabricating that security log, editing the video to misrepresent an incident, filing a false theft report through Brody, those aren't things the school board handles. Those are things the police handle." Jade had her notebook open across her knees, pen already moving. "So, the whole school investigation is the wrong arena." "The school investigation was designed to be the only arena," Trey said, "because in that arena, Chase's mother controls the outcome. In that arena, his father's name is on every policy document. But if we build an evidentiary package strong enough to take to an outside authority," he tapped the legal pad, "none of that protection matters, not even slightly." Destiny looked at me. "How close are we to that?" "We have one crack in the fake security log, Basia," I said, "and possibly a dash cam from a delivery truck that was parked on the north edge of the lawn the entire afternoon." I paused. "We haven't confirmed the footage yet." "Then that's step one," Jade said. She looked at Trey. He looked at me. I looked toward the kitchen where I could still hear my dad moving around. "I need my dad," I said. "My father found the logistics company in 40 minutes. I want to explain what I mean when I say he found it. Because it wasn't a simple search. It was the kind of methodical, patient process that my dad applied to everything. The same way he approached a new student's technique or a piece of equipment that needed repairing. He sat at the kitchen table with his reading glasses on and went through the charity fair's vendor registration list, which was publicly posted on the school website because it had been a community event with outside sponsors. 3 of the listed vendors had used outside delivery services. He called all 3 vendor contact numbers, explained he was trying to track down a service vehicle that had been in the area and might have witnessed a safety incident, which was true, framed simply. The second call gave him a company name: Meridian Delivery Services. He called Meridian, asked to speak with whoever had handled the Westbrook delivery on Saturday, was told that information couldn't be shared, said he understood, left his name and number, and explained that a young person's future was connected to what that driver may have seen. 40 minutes later, the driver called back. His name was Derek Okafor. He was 32, had been driving for Meridian for 4 years, and he told my dad, in a matter-of-fact voice, that he still had the footage from that Saturday. He hadn't deleted it. "Something felt off about what I saw," he told my dad. "I didn't know if I was going to need it, so I held on to it." My dad wrote down his number on the back of an envelope, came back to the doorway of the dojo, and said to the 4 of us, He has it. None of us said anything for a moment. Then Trey picked up his legal pad and wrote something at the very top above all three columns and underlined it twice. We met Derek at a coffee shop the following Saturday morning. Neutral public space, Trey's suggestion, for reasons he explained in the language he used when he was being very careful. Chain of custody matters even before we know who we're presenting this to. My dad came with us. Derek was already there when we arrived, tall, wearing a meridian jacket, with the kind of steady, unhurried presence of someone who had thought carefully about whether to show up and had decided that the answer was yes. He had the footage on a tablet. We sat in a booth at the back. He set the tablet on the table, pulled up the file, and said, "I'll let you watch it first. Then we can talk." I want to tell you exactly what it felt like to watch that footage for the first time, because it was one of the strangest moments of my life. Not the worst, not the most dramatic, but genuinely strange in the way that few things are. Strange because it was like watching something happen to someone else and yourself at the same time. Strange because every single thing I remembered was there, exact and unaltered, and there was something almost vertiginous about having your own memory confirmed by a source that had nothing to do with you. The dashcam timestamp started at 1:22 p.m. The truck's camera faced east, northeast, toward the event lawn, with the volunteer booth in the left third of the frame. Not centered, not perfectly positioned, but clearly visible. The booth, the table, the chairs, the banner above it. Me, standing behind it, organizing pamphlets. At 1:31, Chase Whitfield walked into frame with Kyle and Brody. We watched the whole thing in silence. All 4 minutes and change of it. Chase's approach, his comments, the first shove, the crowd beginning to gather, the second shove that brought the table down, and then my three-move response, precise and controlled in real time. 4 seconds. He hit the grass. I stood up. Derek had muted his own audio so we wouldn't be distracted by road noise, which meant we watched all of it in silence. And that silence was its own strange container for whatever was happening in each of us. When it ended, Destiny pressed both hands over her mouth. Jade was already writing. Trey looked at Derek. "What's the timestamp?" "Running continuously from 1:22 p.m. to 4:47 p.m., Derek said. "GPS tracked at that location for the duration. I can pull the GPS log separately." "We'll need both," Trey said. "And a statement from you confirming the footage is unaltered." Derek nodded like he'd expected this. I figured. My dad, who had said nothing the entire time we were watching, reached across the table and shook Derek's hand. He didn't say thank you with words. He didn't need to. I looked at the tablet screen, now dark, and I felt something I didn't quite have a word for in the moment. Not relief exactly, not triumph, not even vindication. It was more like the feeling of putting a key into a lock after a long time of knowing the door was there, but not being able to open it. Not the door swinging open yet, just the click of the key going in. Jade's plan for Chase was simpler and more ruthless than anything Trey would have designed, which is why it worked. She told us about it on the drive back from the coffee shop, from the back seat, with the particular composure she wore when she was in journalist mode. Not cold exactly, just stripped of everything non-essential, clean down to the facts. "Chase is a braggart," she said. "He has always been a braggart. He can't do something clever without eventually telling someone how clever he was." "I've watched him for 2 years," she looked at me. "He'll tell me." "Why you?" Destiny asked. "Because I'm not one of his enemies. I'm not even on his radar as a threat. He knows I work on the school paper, which to him is basically irrelevant. And," she paused, considering, "he's the kind of person who, when someone asks him a flattering question, loses track of everything else." Trey looked at her. You're going to compliment him into a confession. I'm going to let his own ego do the work, she corrected. There's a difference. She found him at lunch on Monday, near the senior tables by the south windows. Deliberate positioning, a place where he felt comfortable and surveilled by the right audience. I know this because she told me about it in precise detail afterward, the kind of detail a journalist files away automatically, the texture and sequencing of a scene. She sat down across from him uninvited, which she said immediately threw him. He expected deference, and she gave him none. She opened by asking him directly how the whole situation with the charity fair had played out. Not, did you do something wrong? Not, I heard about the video. Just, so what actually happened? Because the whole school is talking about it and I want to get it right. Chase, she said, leaned back in his chair and smiled. He talked for 11 minutes. He talked about how the original footage was technically accurate but missing context, which was the version he'd rehearsed. And then he talked. Once, Jade made a casual observation about how quickly the video had spread, sounding impressed, about how that was kind of the point. He talked about how the edit had taken no time at all, honestly, maybe 15 minutes. He talked about how the watch had been placed in the lost and found with a note that pointed toward Amara's name, a detail he offered with a kind of boyish casualness that she described to me later as the most disturbing part of the whole conversation. He said at one point, "Look, when someone embarrasses you in public, you have options. The smart move is to make sure the story that sticks is yours." Jade's phone was in her jacket pocket the entire time. She had started the voice memo app before she sat down. When she played it back for us in the dojo that night, the audio was clear and clean. Ambient lunch noise underneath, Chase's voice on top, unhurried and confident, each detail landing like a nail being driven in. The timestamp on the memo, Monday, 12:08 p.m. to 12:19 p.m. We sat there in the amber light of the dojo, the four of us plus my dad, and listened to Chase Whitfield's voice explain, in his own words, exactly what he had done. Nobody said anything for a long moment after it ended. Then my dad, from his position in the doorway, said quietly, "How quickly can you get all of this to a lawyer?" The formal disciplinary hearing was scheduled for Wednesday, 2 days after Jade's recording, 4 days before the school's annual award ceremony. I know now that the timing was not accidental. A finding against me at the hearing would clear the path to formally revoking the scholarship at the ceremony itself. Public, official, and final. Mr. Patterson caught me in the hallway outside the library on Tuesday morning, the last day of my suspension, the day before the hearing. He fell into step beside me for a single corridor length and said, without preamble and without slowing down, "Tomorrow is a formality. The finding has already been decided. Do not react to anything you hear in that room. Take notes. Say as little as possible. What matters is that you don't give them anything they can use." He peeled off at the next intersection without waiting for a response. I stood there for a moment, then went to the library and sat in the corner by the window and spent 2 hours writing down in precise sequence every single thing I had witnessed and remembered since the Saturday of the charity fair. Not for the hearing, for the record, for the package Trey was building. The hearing itself was held in Conference Room B, a windowless room off the main administrative corridor with a long table and chairs that didn't quite match. Principal Whitfield sat at the head of the table. Beside her, the school's assistant dean of students, a man named Garner who I had never had any real interaction with. Across from them, me, alone. My dad had requested to be present as my guardian and had been told parental attendance at preliminary disciplinary proceedings is not standard protocol, which was, Trey had noted when I told him, almost certainly not true. Chase was there. He sat 2 seats down from Garner in a clean navy polo, and he did not look at me when I walked in. What happened over the next 50 minutes was the most carefully staged performance I had ever sat through. Garner presented the edited video as primary evidence without once mentioning that a formal request for the original, unedited source footage had been submitted by my father and as yet not fulfilled. He presented the falsified security log without disclosing that the timestamp contradicted my documented presence at the volunteer booth. He presented Brody's theft complaint as a corroborating witness statement. He called Chase to speak. Chase spoke with the practiced ease of someone who had been coached, or simply someone who had spent enough time watching his parents perform authority that the performance was second nature. He described feeling threatened. He used the word scared twice. He said he had just been trying to have a conversation when I suddenly attacked him. He said he was worried about the safety of the school community. I took notes. I wrote down every word. Not because I intended to produce them in this room. I didn't. I wrote them because my hand needed something to do, and because the act of writing is its own kind of pressure valve, and because every word Chase said was a word that, when placed next to Jade's recording and Derek's footage, became a piece of its own indictment. Two teachers had been in the vicinity of the charity booth when it happened. Both had been listed as witnesses on the original incident report. Neither was called to speak. I wrote that down too. When Garner asked if I had anything to say in response, I looked at Principal Whitfield, who had not once made eye contact with me during the entire proceeding, and I said, "I'd like to note for the record that I've submitted a formal request for the original security camera footage from the East Lamppost, and that request has not been acknowledged or fulfilled." Silence. "That will be addressed in due course," Garner said. "I'd also like to note that I have witnesses who can confirm my location at the time recorded in the student lounge log entry," I said. "I'm available to provide their contact information." Another pause. Principal Whitfield wrote something on the notepad in front of her. "Thank you, Amara," Garner said in the tone of someone closing a door. "We'll be in touch with our determination." I stood up. I picked up my notebook. I said, "Thank you for your time," and I walked out. In the hallway, I let myself stop and stand still for exactly 10 seconds. Just 10. I counted them. Then I kept walking. That night, the four of us, plus my dad and a voice on the phone, Trey's uncle's colleague, an attorney named Ms. Hargrove from the city's legal aid network, went through everything, piece by piece. Derek's footage, time-stamped, GPS verified, unedited, in chain of custody, with Derek's written statement. The time-stamped discrepancy in the security log, documented and cross-referenced against 3 witnesses who could confirm my location. Jade's recording, clear audio, continuous, dated, and timed, capturing Chase's own account of fabricating the evidence. Trey's written legal analysis, specific statute references for evidence tampering, false reporting, and conspiracy to defraud, organized into a 6-page document that he had formatted to look, Jade said, like something a 30-year-old paralegal would turn in. "This is sufficient," Ms. Hargrove said, after she had been quiet on the line for a long time. "I want to be careful with that word. It means sufficient to file. Sufficient to open an investigation, not sufficient to guarantee a specific outcome. But what you've assembled here is real. This isn't a school complaint. This is a criminal referral." "What's the next step?" my dad asked. "You file with the district attorney's office and simultaneously with the school board's independent oversight committee," she said. "You do both at the same time, so neither entity can quietly bury it while waiting for the other to act. And you pick your moment carefully. Somewhere public. Somewhere the response is visible. Somewhere walking it back, afterward, requires explaining yourself to more than just the immediate administration." Trey looked at the rest of us. "The award ceremony is Saturday," he said. "The whole district is there. Board members, local press, parent organizations. Amara has been summoned to attend for the scholarship review." He paused. "That's not a coincidence. They want to revoke it publicly as a statement. So we make it a statement about something else." The line was quiet for a moment. "If that's your chosen venue," Ms. Hargrove said carefully, "make sure your people are in position before anything begins. Don't let the first move be theirs." We talked for another hour. By the time we ended the call, the plan was mapped. Not every detail, but the structure of it, the sequence, the roles each of us would play, and where each of us needed to be when it started. Jade would handle the AV access. She'd been on the tech committee for school events all year and knew the auditorium system better than the IT department did. Trey had already contacted the district oversight committee in writing with a delivery confirmation. My dad would coordinate with Ms. Hargrove on the formal filing. Destiny would stay close to me. And I would walk into that auditorium on Saturday morning exactly as I always walked into any room: straight, measured, giving nothing away. My job was to be exactly what they had tried to say I wasn't: steady, honest, present, and let the evidence do the rest. I don't think I slept more than 2 hours that Friday night. Not from fear. I want to be clear about that, because the last time I hadn't slept, the reason was dread, and this was different. This was the feeling before a competition. The specific kind of alertness that comes from knowing something real is coming and wanting to be at your full capacity when it does. I lay in my bed and ran through every detail of the plan. The timing, the positions, the contingencies Trey had mapped out in his particular exhaustive way. I thought about what could go wrong. I thought about what we'd do if it did. At some point, I got up and went to my desk. My black belt was folded on the chair beside it. I'd taken it out earlier that week without fully knowing why. Some instinct to have it nearby, the way you keep a thing close when everything else feels uncertain. I picked it up. There's a weight to it that you don't expect the first time you hold someone's black belt. Not physical weight exactly, but the other kind. The weight of what it took to get there. Every early morning when I would have rather been asleep. Every session where I'd gotten it wrong, over and over until getting it right became the only thing that felt possible. Every moment my dad had said again, and I had gone again. That belt was 10 years of again. 10 years of choosing the harder thing. I sat at my desk and folded it the way my dad had taught me, precise and deliberate, each fold flat and even, and set it back on the chair. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number, different from the one before. A new number, which meant they'd anticipated that I might have blocked the last one. The message was 3 sentences. Last warning. The attorney who reviewed your package. Her license is up for review this quarter. Walk away from tomorrow. I read it twice. Then I set the phone down next to the folded belt on the chair, and I sat very still for a moment, and I thought about something Mr. Patterson had said in the hallway. What matters is that you don't give them anything they can use. Reaction was a resource. My reaction was a resource. And I was not going to spend it here, in the dark, alone, on a threat that had been designed specifically to make me feel like every avenue was already closed. They had thrown everything they had at me: a fabricated video, a fake security log, a false theft report, a suspension, a scholarship freeze, a rigged hearing, 2 threatening texts. And now, at midnight the night before the ceremony, an attempt to reach past me and intimidate the one attorney who had looked at our evidence and said, "This is enough." I picked up my phone and texted Trey. They messaged again, new number, trying to get to Ms. Hargrove now, screenshot attached. His reply came back in under 2 minutes, which meant he was awake too. Already anticipated. She's been briefed. Filing goes in at 7 a.m. regardless. We're ready. I set the phone face down. The belt was folded on the chair. The room was quiet. Outside my window, the neighborhood was dark and still in that specific way of very late nights. Not the absence of noise, but the presence of a different kind of quiet, one that belonged to the hours before things changed. Tomorrow, everything was going to change. I didn't know yet exactly how. I didn't know which moment it would happen in, or whose face I would be looking at when it did. But I knew. With the kind of certainty that lives in your chest rather than your head, the kind you can't argue yourself out of because it doesn't come from reasoning, it comes from something older and deeper than that. I knew that all of it. Every piece, every small cracked fault line we had found and widened and documented over the past 2 weeks was about to become visible to everyone in that auditorium at once. And this time, the only thing that was going to go viral was the truth. My dad ironed my shirt the night before. I didn't ask him to. I found it hanging on the back of my bedroom door when I woke up Saturday morning. A white button-down I'd worn to academic presentations before, pressed flat with a crease down each sleeve, exactly the kind of detail he never mentioned and never needed credit for. I stood in the doorway looking at it for a moment, and something about the sight of it, that small, careful act in the middle of everything, made my throat tighten in a way I did not let become anything else. I got dressed, I tied my laces, I went downstairs. My dad was at the kitchen counter with his back to me, pouring coffee, and he didn't turn around when I came in, just said, "Eat something real, you'll need it." I made toast. I ate it standing at the counter beside him, both of us looking out the window at the backyard in the early morning light. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. There was a quality to that silence that was different from any other kind we'd shared. Not the heavy silence of the weeks before, not the careful silence of strategy sessions, but something lighter and more deliberate. The silence of two people who have already said everything necessary and are simply letting the day begin. At 7:15, Trey texted, "Filing confirmed. DA's office and oversight committee both received the package at 7:03 a.m. Delivery confirmations attached." I showed my dad the screen. He read it, handed the phone back, and finished his coffee. "Ready?" he said. "Yes," I said. And we left. The Westbrook Academy Annual Awards ceremony was held in the main auditorium, a room that seated 600 people and, on ceremony days, usually held closer to 8. By the time we arrived at 9:15, the parking lot was already three-quarters full. I could see the setup through the tall glass doors as we approached. Rows of chairs in the main hall, a stage with a podium and a standing screen, flower arrangements on the tables near the entrance, board members in suits talking in small groups near the lobby's east wall. This was the kind of event that Chase Whitfield's family had designed their entire identity around, his mother presiding, his father in the front row, the name on the donor plaque beside the main entrance. This was their room, in their building, on their terms. I walked through the front doors with my dad, and I kept my eyes straight ahead. Destiny found me near the auditorium entrance before I'd taken 30 steps inside. She came in close, voice low. "Jade is in the AV room. She got access 20 minutes ago. Trey is near the east exit. He's coordinating with 2 officers who are here as event security." She glanced around. "Everything is in position." "Chase?" I asked. "Backstage. He got here early." Her expression shifted slightly. "He's been talking to people. I think he knows something is off." I nodded. That didn't change anything. The plan didn't depend on Chase being caught off guard. It depended on the evidence speaking in a room full of people who had enough power to act on what they heard. And those people were already seated 20 feet away. My dad put his hand briefly on my shoulder. Not a grip, not reassurance exactly, just contact. Present. Then he moved toward the parent seating area, and I walked toward the row of chairs along the side wall where suspended students awaiting scholarship review had been directed to sit, which is to say, they had made me come here to be publicly finished. I sat down. The ceremony started at 9:30, precisely on schedule. The board chair opened with remarks about community investment and academic excellence. Two teachers were recognized for service awards. A student choir performed. Three scholarship recipients from the junior class were called to the stage, each one receiving an envelope and a handshake and a round of applause that filled the auditorium warmly, genuinely. Superintendent Robert Whitfield sat in the second row from the front, left aisle seat. I could see the back of his head from where I was sitting. Silver gray hair, broad shoulders, the posture of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room he walked into. His wife, Principal Whitfield, was visible near the stage, standing just off stage left, beside one of the event coordinators. Chase, I couldn't see yet. Still backstage, according to Destiny's last check-in. At 9:52, the board chair announced that the next portion of the program would address a scholarship review. He said my name. I stood. I walked toward the side door that led backstage, because that was where the review process was supposedly held, a private room where, I had been told in the formal summons letter, the committee would inform me of their determination before it was announced publicly. The hallway backstage was narrow and lit with the kind of fluorescent strip lighting that made everything look slightly institutional. I had taken maybe 12 steps toward the review room when I heard a door behind me click shut. I turned around. Chase was leaning against the wall at the far end of the corridor. Kyle stood to his right. Brody was positioned near the door I'd just come through. The three of them in the hallway with the door closed behind me. Chase smiled. That specific smile. The one I had seen on the charity fair lawn 3 weeks ago. The one that looked like ease but wasn't. "Scholarship girl," he said. "Right on time." I said nothing. I assessed the space. 12 feet between me and Chase, 6 feet to Brody at the door, a second exit at the far end of the corridor past Chase that was almost certainly locked during events. I noted the small black dome of a security camera mounted near the ceiling at the midpoint of the hallway. I noted that Jade had not yet confirmed the AV system was active. I needed 30 more seconds. "You went and got a lawyer," Chase said, pushing off the wall and taking a few casual steps toward me. "That's actually kind of impressive. I mean, it's not going to work. My dad's been making calls since yesterday morning, and I promise you, whatever you filed is getting buried before anyone reads it. But the effort." He made a gesture that was somewhere between a shrug and a compliment. "You tried." He was close now. 8 feet. Kyle moved to the left. Brody was still at the door. "I want you to understand something," Chase continued. His voice had dropped, the performance quality gone out of it, and what was underneath was something more direct and more revealing than the script he usually ran. Genuine contempt, stripped of all its dressing. "You don't belong here. You never did. And everything that's happened in the last 3 weeks, the video, the hearing, the scholarship review, that's not me being cruel. That's me being clear. Some things just have an order to them, and you've been refusing to see it." He reached out and grabbed my arm. My phone in my left jacket pocket buzzed once. Short. A single vibration pattern. The signal Jade and I had agreed on. The screen was live. Everything from that point forward happened in a sequence I can now describe to you with precision, though in the moment it felt less like a sequence and more like a single continuous event that had been waiting a very long time to occur. Chase's grip on my arm lasted approximately 2 seconds. I turned my body, controlled, minimal, exactly the movement needed, and redirected his hold. He stumbled forward half a step. It was not a dramatic takedown, it was just enough. Kyle made a move from the left and stopped when the door behind Brody opened. Two officers stepped through. Not rushing, not yelling, just stepping through with the particular unhurried authority of people who have been briefed and positioned and are doing exactly what they came to do. Chase Whitfield, one of them said. In the auditorium, the screen that had been displaying the ceremony program now showed something else. Jade had been in the AV room for 40 minutes by that point. She had accessed the auditorium's presentation system through the same admin panel she'd used to run the school paper's visual displays at 3 previous events. She had queued the files in sequence. First, the dashcam footage, timestamp visible in the corner, 4 minutes and 20 seconds of unedited, GPS-verified reality. Then, after that, 11 minutes and 4 seconds of audio recording. Chase's own voice, his own words, his own account of everything he had done, delivered in the confident and incriminating tone of someone who believed he was untouchable. She pressed play during the exact window we had identified, the brief gap between the choir performance and the scholarship review announcement, when the auditorium screen was technically live, but the ceremony coordinator had stepped away from the AV desk. The dashcam footage opened on a wide shot of the charity fair lawn, clear, steady, the way commercial dashcam footage always looks. No drama in the camera itself, just everything exactly as it was. Parents, board members, teachers, students, 600 people in a room watched Chase Whitfield shove a 14-year-old girl once, and then again hard enough to bring a table down. They watched her get up. They watched her 3-move response. They watched it play to its end. Chase on the grass, Destiny appearing from the left, Amara collecting her pamphlets from the ground with the steady hands of someone who had been trained since childhood not to let what was happening inside her face show on the outside. Then Chase's recorded voice came through the auditorium speakers. The edit literally took me maybe 15 minutes, and now she's completely done. I know from Destiny, who was in the auditorium throughout, positioned near the rear exit with a clear line of sight to the stage and the front rows, that the room went completely still during the dashcam footage. Not the uneasy half-silence of an uncomfortable moment. Actual stillness, the kind that descends over a crowd when every individual in it has suddenly stopped performing their social role and is simply watching. She told me that during the audio recording, she could see people's expressions change. Not all at once. In stages, the moment of confusion, the moment of recognition, the moment where it clicked fully into place, and whatever version of this story they had been carrying was replaced by the version they were hearing now, in the voice of the person who had engineered the whole thing, casually and with evident satisfaction. She told me that Robert Whitfield, superintendent of the district, stood up from the second row about 4 minutes into the recording. He made it 2 steps toward the stage before a board member sitting 2 seats to his left put her hand on his arm and said something that Destiny couldn't hear from where she was standing, but that she described as, from the expression on his face, unambiguous. He sat back down. In the backstage corridor, Chase was detained before I had fully processed that it was happening. Kyle put up a brief objection, the verbal kind, indignant, reaching for the social register of someone whose status usually insulated him from real consequences. It didn't last. Brody said nothing. He looked at the floor and stayed there. A third officer appeared and escorted me out of the hallway back toward the auditorium, and I walked past the backstage table where the ceremony's printed programs were stacked in neat rows and past the flower arrangement near the stage left entrance and into the auditorium itself. The screen had finished playing. The room was not quiet anymore. It was the opposite of quiet. The particular noise of 600 people processing something significant at the same time. A sound that was part conversation and part shock and part the rustling and shifting of people turning to each other, asking each other what they'd just seen, as though someone else in the room might have a different answer. On the stage, the board chair was standing at the podium. He was a man in his 60s who I had seen at two previous school events and who had always struck me as someone who took institutional process very seriously. He looked, in this moment, like a person who had been handed an unexpected problem and had decided visibly and in real time that the correct response to it was to handle it directly. He tapped the microphone once. The room gradually settled. "I want to address what this community has just seen," he said. His voice was measured, not shaken, not performing calm, just steady in the way that genuine authority sounds when it doesn't need to perform itself. "Before we continue with the ceremony, I need to make several things clear." He looked down at his notes, then back up. "First, the footage and audio recording you just viewed have been submitted to the District Attorney's Office and the School Board's Independent Oversight Committee, effective this morning. 3 students, Chase Whitfield, Kyle Mercer, and Brody Nash, have been detained by law enforcement officers present at this event in connection with charges of evidence tampering, filing a false report, and conspiracy." He paused. "These are not school disciplinary matters. They are criminal matters, and they will be handled accordingly." From the second row, I saw Robert Whitfield's hands grip the armrests of his chair. "Second," the board chair continued, "given the evidence presented and the clear conflict of interest involved in the recent disciplinary proceedings against one of our students, all findings from those proceedings are hereby voided. The record is cleared." He looked directly out into the auditorium. Not at me specifically. I don't think he could see me from where I was standing near the side aisle, but in my direction. "Amara Davis's scholarship is reinstated, effective immediately, with a formal letter of acknowledgement from this board to follow in writing." Somewhere to my left, I heard Destiny exhale, a long, unsteady sound, like she'd been holding that breath for 3 weeks. What happened in the rest of that morning is harder to describe than the dramatic parts, because it was mostly procedural, and procedure after crisis has a particular quality to it. Slightly unreal, the way the world looks the morning after a storm when everything is still there but rearranged. Officers taking statements, board members convening in urgent clusters near the lobby walls, parents asking questions that no one quite had answers to yet, teachers standing at the edges of it all, recalibrating. Superintendent Whitfield left the building with a board member on either side of him. I don't know what was said. I know that by the following Monday, both he and Principal Whitfield had been placed on administrative leave pending a formal district investigation into their roles in the disciplinary process. I know that the leave became permanent within the month. I know that the word resignation appeared in the district's public statement, and that the word accountability appeared in the one after that. I know that Mr. Patterson, when he passed me in the lobby on the way out of the building that morning, stopped for 1 second and said quietly, "Well done," then kept walking. I know that Jade's written account of the entire sequence of events, from the charity fair to the backstage confrontation, was published in the school paper within 48 hours. And I know that 3 days after that, a city news outlet contacted her directly about reprinting it. She was 15 years old. It was her first professional publication. She texted me a screenshot of the email offer with a single emoji and no words, and I understood completely. I know that Derek Okafor, the delivery driver, sent my dad a text that said simply, "Glad the footage was useful. Take care of that girl, my dad saved it." I know that Trey spent the rest of that Saturday afternoon at a table in the public library, writing a detailed case summary that Ms. Hargrove told him, when he sent it to her, was better organized than half the briefs she received from actual clerks. He just shrugged when I told him that. "I've been reading case law since I was 11, he said. This wasn't hard. It wasn't nothing either. We went to the dojo that night, my dad and me, not for training. The mats weren't set out, the lights were at half, and neither of us was in any shape for discipline drills. We just went because it was the space that felt most like itself, the one place in our lives that had stayed exactly the same through everything that had happened. I sat on the floor near the center of the room, back against the wall, legs stretched out in front of me. My dad sat across from me, same position, like two people who had been doing this long enough that the formality had worn away and left just the fact of it. Two people in a room they both trusted, at the end of a day that had taken everything they'd built and turned it into something real. For a while, neither of us said anything. The building made its small nighttime sounds, the ventilation, the distant street noise through the walls, the particular creak of the floor in the northeast corner that I had heard so many thousands of times. It had become like a note in a familiar song. "How do you feel?" my dad asked. Not, "Are you okay?" which was never really a question he asked, because the answer was too easy to perform. "How do you feel?" was the real one. I thought about it honestly. "Tired," I said. "Relieved. A little—" I searched for the word. "Empty. Like something that's been taking up a lot of space is just gone now, and I don't know what the space is supposed to hold." He nodded slowly. "That's normal. You've been carrying weight for 3 weeks. It doesn't just disappear when it's over. You have to wait for your body to remember how to walk without it." I looked at the ceiling. "Dad," I said, "did I do the right thing? Stepping in at the fair, I mean. The first time. If I had just walked away—" "You would have walked away," he said, "and none of this would have happened the same way. Maybe something worse. Maybe nothing at all, and he would have done it again. To you, or to someone else who didn't have what you have." He was quiet for a moment. "There's no clean answer to that question, but I'll tell you what I know for certain." He looked at me directly. "You never fought because you were angry," he said. "Not that afternoon at the fair, not through any of what came after. You were many things: scared, hurt, exhausted, probably furious under all of it. But you never let any of that be the reason you moved. You moved because it was the right thing to do, because someone needed to, and you were the one who could." He paused. "That's the difference. That is the entire difference between what you did and what he did. And no one can take that from you. Not a hearing, not a suspension, not a video, not a text in the middle of the night. That's yours." I sat with that for a long time. Outside the dojo, the street was quiet. Somewhere in the city, a court process was beginning that would take months. Somewhere, two people who had used their positions to protect their son from the consequences of who he had chosen to be were learning, for the first time, what consequences felt like from the other side. Somewhere, Derek Okafor was probably watching TV or making dinner, already moving on with his life, not knowing that a 40-minute delivery job on a Saturday afternoon in April had meant everything to someone he'd never properly met. And somewhere, Jade was probably still at her desk, writing. I thought about all the things I would carry forward from this, not the drama of it. The drama was over, and honestly, I was glad. What I'd carry was the rest of it. The version of Trey who wrote 6 pages of legal analysis at 15 because he cared that much. The version of Destiny who appeared every single time, from every direction, without being asked. The version of my dad who ironed my shirt the night before and asked no credit for it. The version of a stranger named Derek who held onto footage because something felt off, because he was the kind of person who noticed things and took them seriously. These were the people who showed up, not because they had to, not because the system rewarded it, because that was who they were. I want to close this out by talking directly to you for a second, because that's why I'm here and that's why you watched all the way through. If you are in something right now, something that feels like it's been designed to make you feel small or wrong, or like the truth of what happened to you doesn't matter because the person who did it has more power than you do. I want you to hear this. The truth is not owned by the people with the most resources. It doesn't belong to whoever controls the process or runs the building or has the most letters after their name. It existed before any of that. It will exist after. Your job, the only job, is to survive long enough, clearly enough, to give other people the chance to see it. That's not easy. I'm not going to tell you it's easy, but it is possible. And you are not as alone in it as it feels at the worst moments. I promise you that. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what part hit you hardest. I read every single one. If you're not subscribed yet, do that now because I have more stories to tell. And the next one is one I've been working up to for a long time. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourselves out there.